Welcome to Networking RX, a podcast devoted to helping business professionals like you enhance your networking skills in order to become more proficient giving and receiving quality business referrals and improving the overall quality of your life and the lives of those around you. The Networking RX podcast is a production of AmSpirit Business Connections, an organization whose mission is to empower business success through networking.
Back in 2017, I was invited to a wedding. It was my sister's wedding. It was over in Croatia. It was her second marriage, and she had a destination wedding in Dubrovnik, Croatia. It was a lot of fun. But my brother, he's a little older than I am, he's always got jokes, and one of his jokes was he said, if you know somebody who speaks 3 languages, they're multilingual. Okay, great. And if you know somebody who speaks 2 languages, they're bilingual. And his punchline is, if you know somebody who speaks 1 language, they're American. And there's a lot of truth to that. I talked to various people around the world, and most people, certainly out of the UK, but you start talking to people in other parts of Europe, Marilise, who's in Estonia, people speak other languages. Kind of makes me feel a little bit bad, like maybe I should speak another language. I don't know, this old dog's going to learn a new trick. But I got to thinking about it, and we all speak multiple languages, if you will. And we need to know when to speak the right language to be successful, certainly with respect to building relationships and getting referrals. The title of this is Want Referrals? Well, then you will need to avoid these 2 types of communications. So there are really 3 types of communications. There's what I call the office communication. And the office communication is that conversation you have around the office, and it tends to involve industry jargon, internal jargon, marketing speak, if you will, and that tends to resonate around the office. And in thinking about and preparing for this, I thought about when I worked in my first job, my first and only job in public accounting. I was a tax consultant, and we definitely had our own language. I remember one of the taglines that we had at one point. They put an ad on the Super Bowl. I'm not sure why they did. It's neither here nor there, but we had our own language. They had a slogan, we're not just knowledge, we're know-how, or something like that. And we would giggle about it in the office. It's like, okay, yeah, that sounds kind of cute. And, I envisioned that the partners put a lot of money into that branding, and, it sounded great. And I guess if you really think about it, it does, but it meant a lot. It meant more to us than it did to anybody else. We got what they were saying. Okay, yeah, I'm not just going out to a client and imparting my knowledge on them. I'm going to bring them know-how and show them how to implement and execute on this knowledge. So it made sense for us, but we had the benefit of really kind of thinking about it. The partners really thought about it. Again, I'm sure that many of them sat around with a marketing type to come up with it. And it worked. It worked, from the standpoint of, okay, this is what we're trying to do with our clients. The other thing we had, obviously there's industry jargon, but we had office jargon too. We had software that we had internally prepared or internally configured to analyze our client's situation. It was called Expert Tax. Expert Tax, all one word. And in the office, we would talk about it and say, hey, we need to go out to this client and run Expert Tax. And that was something that was shorthand for us. We knew what we needed to do. But when we went to clients didn't know what we meant by Expert Tax. We would actually have to describe what it is and what it did and how the process all worked. Whereas in the office, we just had to say, hey, have we done Expert Tax? What did Expert Tax say? So on the one, you have this top level, you have this office jargon, and all of us, even if you're a solopreneur, you kind of have your own office jargon. I think about realtors. Realtors go in and they have their office jargon. The computer systems, if you're with Keller Williams or you're with Howard Hanna or Coldwell Banker, there's all sorts of different little things that are specific to those particular brands. and you talk in those terms because that shorthand really helps you get things done. If we had to, in our office and the firm I worked with, had to explain to everybody what expert tax was, because we didn't have the word expert tax to define it, things would just take a whole lot longer. You know, things like, going to the law library, doing this, doing that. I mean, we just had this shorthand and we just knew what it all meant. And it just helped us move at a much faster pace. And it's probably the same thing with real estate offices. They talk about, hey, go into this system and do this. And I can't tell you exactly what these things are called, but I'm willing to bet that everybody has their own little office jargon. And that's the top level. The mid level is the conversations we might have with our clients. And again, when I was talking with clients, I needed to avoid the office jargon. And you learn the hard way when you would be talking with clients and, using the word expert tax. They really had no idea what it meant. And so the conversations were often met with that same look that a dog is going to give you when you showed a card trick. It's just like, what are you talking about? And so when we're meeting with clients, you can still use industry jargon. I could go out to my tax consulting clients and I could talk about tax forms. I could talk about IRS codes. I could talk about lots of things that were industry related because I was generally talking to somebody who was versed in taxes. I was talking to a tax department or a CFO or a controller for a company that knew these sorts of things. And there's, the tax world is very complicated. Everyone's world is complicated, but tax is certainly complicated. You have the Internal Revenue Code, you have regulations, you've got the accounting side of it has what are called financial accounting standards, and they all have acronyms, and it's a lot. It's a lot. And so if you're talking to a client, they can get some of that, probably a lot of it. And you need to you need to talk in those terms because that just allows you to have much more fluid and effective conversations. And that's great. The top level conversation is great for around the office, and that mid level, or that what I'll call that client conversation, is great for working with clients. The problem is that many of us, we try to get referrals, and we tend to default to either office conversation or we'll default to client conversation with respect to our referral partners. And we really run into problems in doing that. We run into a lot of problems because often, not always, but often the people who are our referral partners really have no insight or knowledge as to the types of things that are happening in our you know, in our worlds, with the jargon around the office. They don't know, people I would, a lot of the people I worked with as a tax consultant, they were bankers and they were attorneys. Some of the attorneys got the language. Many of them didn't. They were just corporate attorneys and didn't really get into the Internal Revenue Code. And so talking about things in the Internal Revenue Code and codes and regulations and tax court cases, just might have gone right over their head. And that can happen a lot as well with respect to just other people trying to get their referral partners to send them referrals. We start talking in jargon. I think back to the time of 2008, 2009, and realtors were throwing around this term short sale. And I thought about this often, that I wonder how many people really understand what a short sale is. Now, nobody's raising their hand and saying, excuse me, I don't know what you mean by you're looking for somebody who wants to do a short sale. And the reason you don't see that is because people will sit in a room and they'll think, or people will be having a conversation and think, well, maybe I should know what this is. And I don't want to look stupid by saying, I don't know what you're talking about. And so realtors would run around and they would talk about short sales. And I'm not picking on realtors. I'm just using that as an example, because we all do it from time to time, is that we default to this jargon that we use all the time in the office, or with our clients, and our referral partners might not know. And I'll, again, using realtors as an example, or myself as a tax consultant, I I was 16 hours a day. I'm working on my job, trying to understand taxes and reading tax court cases and, talking that jargon. And referral partners probably think about it for 16 seconds. That 16 seconds I'm talking to them. And people don't want to feel like they're, that they don't understand something. And so what they'll end up doing is they'll smile and nod their head and say, yeah, I know, sure, I know. Um, and so, the lesson today is that if you're out there, if you really want to get referrals, is you need to think through the types of things you're talking about, and you need to avoid this office talk and this client talk and bring it down to actual referral talk, things that people understand. And that's not always an easy thing because, again, you're thinking about it. Realtors working on real estate 16 hours a day, 7 days a week, probably dreaming about it as well. And that's just kind of their default language. It's like going to a foreign country and, yeah, they speak English, but predominantly they speak French. And so when you go to them and say, listen, I don't speak French, they're going to stumble with their English because, they don't know it. And so it's the same thing when we're out there talking and trying to talk about we're so used to talking in this office and client jargon that it can be hard to talk at this referral level. But if you want to get referrals, that's something that you're going to have to do, is to really dial into talking at a level that people understand, that your referral partners understand. It's not their job to raise their level of understanding to how you're speaking. It's your responsibility to bring your level of talk down to them. And it can take hard work. And, a couple suggestions I have for doing it is, one is stepping away and really stepping back from what you're saying and really kind of dissect it. Again, it's hard work. You need to put some time in. You can't just flip a switch and have it happen. But just sit down and say, okay, how would I explain a short sale? How would I explain what a buyer's market means? How would I explain what a 1031 exchange is? That's kind of a tax term as well. How would I explain the alternative minimum tax to people? And those are things that certainly people in the office know, your clients might know, but when you're talking about referral partners, you need to put it in terms that they really understand. And so you really need to kind of dig in. And there are various exercises that I'll go through with people to try and get them thinking like that. And it's beyond the scope of today. But step one is just thinking about the types of things you're saying and just really being critical of them. Not critical in the I don't want to say the abusive sense, but not in the negative sense, but just really kind of saying, okay, does somebody understand this? I get it, but does somebody else understand it? And really ask yourself that, and come up with things to say. And then I would test it out on people who are in your referral partners. And I think one of the most dangerous questions out there is, do you understand? Because you could say something to somebody, do you understand what I mean by short sale? And 9 times out of 10, they're probably going to say, yeah, I do. Inside they're saying, I don't quiz me, but I'm going to say I do. So I don't think that just asking somebody, hey, do you understand what I'm saying is a good approach. I think a better approach for it might be to just, hey, can you repeat this back to me? How can you demonstrate? Can you give me an example? So they understand. And again, it's hard work, but it's work that's a great investment if you're serious about getting referrals. And so stop and think about it. Don't assume anything. Don't assume that they understand. When I was in private practice, I assumed everybody understood the law. Yeah, I'm an attorney. You all know. Just send me your referrals. And I did that for about 6 months and ended up getting very little out of it. It wasn't until I really started taking, the office talk. I was a solopreneur, sole attorney in private practice, taking that office talk that I might say with clients and really kind of taking it down to a very, very basic level. When you rent residential real estate, there's a lease, right? Well, when people rent when people lease commercial space, there's a lease as well, and it's really thick, and there's lots of terms that are in there that nobody understands, and the law does not protect commercial lessees. People, there you go. Lessee is a term I shouldn't be using. Doesn't protect the business person who's renting office space. Again, I need to kind of take it down. Lessee, lessor, those words are kind of stuck in my head, and they don't work. They don't, they work if I'm talking to an attorney. They work if I'm talking to somebody who's in tune to real estate jargon, a realtor, for example. But it doesn't work when I'm just talking to somebody who might not deal with that all the time. So I encourage you to really think about the things you're talking about and ask yourself, is the way I'm presenting myself, is it office talk? Is it client talk? Or is it suitable for being referral talk? Having somebody understand it who can refer me. And just as beauty is in the eye of the beholder, the notion of whether something's jargon or understandable really is in the ear of the person who's listening. So they're the people you need to default to. So you need to put the work in, you need to ask them the questions and continue to refine this. I continue to refine my message. I can see when it hits. I can see when it doesn't. Not always, but a lot of times I can see when it hits. And I'm just committed to trying to be better at it. And I hope you do the same.
Thanks for joining us on the Networking RX podcast. Please put what you've learned into action today and let us know if you have questions, comments, or ideas for future topics. You can email them to us at podcast@amspirit.com. That's AmSpirit.com. Finally, so you never miss an episode, be sure to subscribe to the Networking RX podcast through iTunes, Overcast, or however you receive your podcasts. Now get out and network with someone.
The Networking RX podcast is the copyright production of AmSpirit Business Connection. All rights reserved.